Every photograph captures a moment, a smile, a place, a memory frozen in time. Most photographs are looked at years later and bring back stories of a laughter, adventure, and the people we love. But every once in a while, a photograph becomes something else, a mystery, because hidden inside a simple image is a question that may never be answered. What happened next? Tonight, we're stepping into the stories behind some of the most haunting final photographs ever taken. Images that captured explorers before they vanished into the unknown, travelers before their lives were changed forever, and the ordinary moments that became the last glimpse the world would ever have of someone. Some of these stories have answers, some remain surrounded by questions, and some leave us staring at a photograph wondering, did anyone in that picture know they were looking at the final moment? Welcome to Nightly Haven. I'm your host, Nikki. Tonight we're uncovering the creepiest last photographs ever taken. Fear tingles down your spine and hairs stand on end. Mysteries unknown and tales in the dark. Are you ready? Hello? In January of 1959, a group of 9 experienced hikers set out into the frozen wilderness of Russia's Ural Mountains. They were young, skilled, and prepared. Their goal was simple: complete a challenge winter expedition across the mountains. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, an experienced student hiker from the Polytechnic Institute. Among the group were climbers, engineers, and outdoor enthusiasts. They weren't inexperienced tourists wandering into danger. These were people who understood the mountains. They understood survival, which is what makes what happened next so disturbing. During their journey, the group took several photographs, normal photographs, the kind people take when they're on an adventure. Smiling faces, snow-covered landscapes, friends walking through a frozen wilderness. But among these photographs was one that would become famous, a blurry image recovered from one of their cameras, a strange, unclear figure in the distance. Some believe it was simply a person from the expedition. Others have claimed it showed something much stranger. But the photographs itself wasn't the only mystery, because the hikers never returned. When rescuers finally found their abandoned campsites, some immediately seemed wrong. Their tent had been cut open from the inside. Their belongings were still there. Their shoes and warm clothing were left behind. It appeared they had fled into the freezing night with almost nothing to protect them. Their bodies were eventually discovered scattered around the area. The investigation created decades of speculation. Some theories blamed an avalanche, others suggest a military incident. Some people turn towards more unusual explanations. But one thing remains certain: a group of experienced hikers entered the mountains. They took photographs of their journey, and somewhere along the way, their adventure became one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in history. That final photograph remains frozen in time, a reminder that sometimes the most ordinary moments can become the moments we remember forever. Far off the coast of Scotland sits a group of remote islands known as the Flannan Isles. Beautiful, rugged, and incredibly isolated. In the 1900s, 3 lighthouse keepers were assigned to watch over the lighthouse there: James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur. Their job was simple but important: keep the light burning, because for ships traveling those dangerous waters, that lighthouse could mean the difference between reaching land safely or disappearing into the sea. But in December of that year, something strange happened. A supply ship arrived at the island and noticed something unusual. The lighthouse light was not operating. The men were missing, and no one knew where they had gone. The investigation found signs that something had happened at the lighthouse. Equipment had been damaged, supplies were left behind, and the men had vanished without a trace. No bodies were ever recovered. Over a century later, the mystery remains. Did a massive wave sweep them into the sea? Did an accident occur while they were repairing damage? Or was there something else that happened on the lonely island? There are no final photographs of the men themselves, but the lighthouse became the final chapter of their story, a place where three men arrived to protect a light, and where they disappeared into darkness. Now, Mount Everest has always represented one of humanity's greatest challenges, a mountain so massive that for centuries reaching its summit seemed impossible. In 1924, British climber George Mallory attempted something extraordinary. He wanted to be the first people to reach the top of the Everest. Mallory was not a stranger to danger. He had already attempted to climb before. When asked why he wanted to climb Everest, he reportedly gave one of the most famous answers in mountaineering history: because it's there. On June 8, 1924, Mallory and climber Andrew began their final ascent. They were seen heading towards the summit, and then they disappeared. For decades, nobody knew what happened. Did they reach the top before dying on the mountain? Or did they fall before completing their mission? In 1999, Mallory's body was discovered high on Everest. But the greatest question remained unanswered. Did George Mallory and Andrew Irvine reach the summit nearly 30 years before the official recognized first successful climb? Among Mallory's belongings was a photograph of his wife. He had promised to leave it at the summit if he reached the top. But the photograph was not found with his remains. A tiny detail, but one that continues to fuel speculation. The mountain kept its secrets for decades, and even today, Everest holds the stories of those who challenge it and never came home. Now, not every haunting photograph comes from a dangerous expedition or a mysterious disappearance in the wilderness. Sometimes the most unsettling photographs are the ones that capture a normal family right before their lives change forever. On Christmas Eve in 1945, the Sutter family of Fayetteville, West Virginia was preparing to celebrate the holiday. George and Jenny Sutter had 10 children. They were a large, close family living an ordinary life. But the Christmas night would become one of America's most enduring mysteries. Around midnight, the Sutter home caught fire. George and Jenny and several of the children escaped, but 5 of the children never made it out, or at least that was the official story, because what happened afterward created decades of questions. When firefighters searched the remains of the house, they expected to find evidence of the children, but they didn't. No remains were discovered. This led the family to believe something impossible, that their children may have survived the fire. The investigation became complicated by strange details. The family claimed their phone line had been cut before the fire. They said their truck, which could have been used as a ladder to reach the upper floors, failed to start. And years later, they received mysterious messages and even a photograph that appeared to show one of the missing boys as a young man. That photograph became one of the most heartbreaking pieces of the mystery. A simple image, a young face, and a question that haunted the Sutter family for the rest of their lives. Was this proof that their son was still alive? The case was never officially solved. The 5 children were declared dead. But the Sutter family never stopped searching, because sometimes the hardest thing isn't knowing someone is gone, it's wondering if they might still be out there. On October 21st, 1978, a young Australian pilot named Frederick Valentich took off for what should have been a routine flight. He was flying a small aircraft over the Bass Strait between Australia and Tasmania. The weather was clear, the flight was normal, until Valentich contacted air traffic control. At first, his conversation sounded ordinary, but then he reported something unusual. A strange object appeared to be following him. According to the radio recordings, Valentich described an aircraft that seemed to be moving in ways he couldn't explain. He reported that the object was metallic and had a green light. Air traffic control questioned him. Was it another aircraft? Could it be a reflection? Was he mistaken? But Valentich insisted something was there, and then came the moment that has fascinated mystery researchers for decades, the final transmission. A strange metallic sound was heard over the radio, then silence. Valentich and his aircraft disappeared. No wreckage was found. No confirmed explanation was ever given. Authorities considered several possibilities: a crash into the ocean, pilot error, misidentified aircraft. Others believe the incident remains one of the most intriguing UFO cases in history. There is no final photograph of Valentich himself, but there are photographs of the aircraft he flew, the last known piece of mystery that vanished with him: a pilot, a plane, a final conversation that ended with questions nobody could answer. What was Frederick Valentich really seeing that day? In November of 1975, a group of logging workers of Arizona claimed they experienced something they would never forget. Their story became one of the most famous alleged UFO encounters in history. A group was driving through the Apache Sitagreaves National Forest after finishing work. Among them was a young logger named Travis Walton. I'm sure you've heard of him. According to the men, they saw a strange glowing object near the road. The other workers claimed Walton approached the object, and then something impossible happened. They said a beam of light struck him, and he disappeared. If you've never seen the movie, it's a really good movie. The crew panicked and drove away, believing Walton was dead. Then came the part that turned the story into a worldwide mystery. Walton was missing for 5 days. When he returned, he claimed that he had been taken aboard the object and experienced something he couldn't explain. The case became highly debated. Some believed the men were telling the truth, others believed it was an elaborate hoax. Years later, the story continued to attract attention through interviews, books, and documentaries. One of the eerie aspects of the case is the normality of the photographs connected to it. Pictures of a group of workers, friends, co-workers, people going about their lives. Nobody in those images knew they were about to become connected to one of the most controversial mysteries of the modern era, because something of the most ordinary photographs captured the moment right before life becomes something completely different. Some mysteries become famous because of one photograph, others because of one final recording. In February 2013, 20-year-old Elisa Lam was staying at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. She was a traveler, a writer, a young woman documenting parts of her journey online. During her stay, she disappeared. The investigation gained worldwide attention after surveillance footage from the hotel's elevator was released. The video showed Lam entering the elevator and behaving in a way that confused many viewers. She appeared to be looking outside the elevator door, moving her hands, reacting as if someone or something was nearby. The footage sparked countless theories online, some more reasonable, others became increasingly unusual. But the reality of the case was much more complicated than the internet speculation. Authorities eventually determined that Lam died by drowning in one of the hotel's rooftop water tanks. Her death was officially ruled accidental. Investigators pointed to her documented mental health struggles and other factors surrounding the tragedy. Still, the elevator footage remains one of the most discussed piece of surveillance videos in modern mystery culture, not because it proves something supernatural, but because it captured a person during a moment nobody watching could fully understand. A final recording, a moment frozen in time, and a reminder that behind every mystery, there is a real person. In the 1800s, there were still parts of the world that remained almost completely unknown. One of those places was the Arctic, a frozen wilderness where temperatures could drop to deadly levels, where ships could become trapped in ice, and where survival depended on preparation, skill, and a little bit of luck. In 1845, British explorer Sir John Franklin set out one of the greatest Arctic expeditions of the age. His missions: find the Northwest Passage, a legendary route through the Arctic that would connect Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. Franklin commanded 2 ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. The expedition carried experienced sailors, supplies for years, and some of the most advanced equipment of the time. They were prepared, at least they thought they were. The ships disappeared. No one knew what happened. Years passed. Search parties were sent. Rumors spread. and eventually clues began to appear. A written note discovered years later revealed that the ship became trapped in ice. The crew abandoned them, and what happened after that remained one of the most tragic mysteries in explanation history. Many of the expedition members left behind photographs, belongings, and records. Images of men dressed in their final clothing, men who believed they were beginning an incredible journey. They had no idea their expedition would become one of history's greatest disappearances. For more than 150 years, the Arctic kept their secrets. Then, in the modern era, the wrecks of both ships were finally discovered. The HMS Erebus was found in 2014, and the HMS Terror was found in 2016. The discovery answered some questions, but not all of them. The exact fate of the crew remains a haunting reminder. Sometimes the greatest adventures in human history becomes the greatest mysteries. Some mysteries aren't about exploring the unknowns. Some are about a person who simply walked into history and vanished. On November 24, 1971, a man using the name Dan Cooper boarded a flight from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. He appeared calm, professional, ordinary, but shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant. At first, she thought it was a simple message. It wasn't. A note claimed he had a bomb. He demanded money, a parachute. After the plane landed, his demands were met. Passengers were released. The aircraft took off again, and somewhere over the Pacific Northwest, D.B. Cooper jumped and disappeared. The FBI launched one of the largest investigations in American history. Thousands of leads were followed. Suspects were questioned, searches were conducted, but Cooper was never found. No confirmed identity, no confirmed location, no clear answers. The only major physical evidence connected to the case was found years later when a young boy discovered some of the ransom money buried under the Columbia River. The mystery created a legend. Who was D.B. Cooper? Was he a skilled criminal who survived? Did he perish in the wilderness? Or did he escape and live in the rest of his life under another name? There are photographs connected to the case, sketches, images of suspects, evidence, but no final photograph, because the greatest mystery of D.B. Cooper is that after that night, the man himself became the missing piece. Now, imagine seeing a ship floating alone in the ocean, no distress signal, no sign of a struggle, no crew, just an empty vessel drifting through the waves. That's exactly what happened with Mary Celeste. In December 1872, the American merchant ship was discovered abandoned in the Atlantic Ocean. When another ship found her, something seemed impossible. The Mary Celeste was still seaworthy. The cargo was mostly intact. Personal belongings remained on board. Food supplies were available, but the crew was gone. The captain, his wife, his young daughter, and the sailors all disappeared. The ship's lifeboat was missing, suggesting that the crew initially left. But why? What could have caused an experienced captain and crew to abandon a ship that appeared to be perfectly capable of sailing? Over the years, countless theories emerged. Pirates, a storm, a seaquake, alcohol fumes from the cargo, even supernatural explanations. But the truth remains unknown. The Mary Celeste became the ultimate ghost ship, not because the ship itself was terrifying, because of what it represented. A place where people were there one moment and gone the next. Now, a photograph, it's just a piece of paper, a frozen second, a moment that cannot move forward. But sometimes that moment becomes something much bigger. The hikers who entered the mountains and never returned, the explorers who disappeared into frozen waters, the pilot whose final words still create questions, the family who spent decades searching for answers, the people who stepped into history without knowing it. Every one of these stories reminds us of something. Behind every mystery is a person, someone with dreams, someone with plans, someone who woke up in that morning believing that they would have another tomorrow. Maybe that's why these photographs stay with us, not because they show the unknown, but because they show the human side of it. The curiosity, the courage, the search for answers. Because even after all these years, we're still looking, we're still wondering. We're still asking the same question. What happened next? Thank you for joining me here at Nightly Haven. I'm your host, Nikki, and if you'd enjoyed tonight's journey into the unknown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who loves a good mystery. And remember, sometimes the most haunting stories aren't the ones hidden in the dark, they're the ones captured in a single photograph. Until next time, keep searching, keep wondering, and I'll see you here at Nightly Haven. Have a good night, guys. Bye.